I'm Skari, your grateful host, and today we dive into my initial impressions of new Warhammer 40,000. That's right, it's time for the next edition. Let's dive in.
The Dark King.
Hello everyone and welcome to Skaredcast, where I play to learn and play to teach. And I hope you do the same. Now, this is the new edition of Warhammer 40,000. Very exciting. Games Workshop did send me a brand new Armageddon box set, which I'm really excited to show off with all of you. And inside with a brand new Rules of Warhammer 40,000 that just went up today for everybody to take a look at, which is really, really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the general idea of what I think of the new edition based on my 26 years of Warhammer playing experience, and I'm going to share it with all of you. And over the course of this release, the pre-release starts on the 6th, and then the full release will be on the 20th of June. So make sure you stay tuned to all the great content. I've got battle reports lined up. I've got content about the campaign system, which is the Dominata system, and also things on not only this YouTube channel, but also the Patreon page and blogs and stuff that I'll be writing up about the missions, the detachments, like the faction packs, like all that stuff that's going to be coming out. So make sure you stay tuned by subscribing, leaving a like, and commenting down below as to what you are most excited about. I really like this little new rulebook. Now, I've been playing the game for a long time, and the rulebook has varied in size. They did do this, I believe, in 6th edition or 5th edition. There was a little mini rulebook that came with the starter set. I do like it. Everything's nicely concise, and of course all the rules are free to download, which is really cool. The new book smell is real. So let's dive into the book itself. We'll take a look at it, go through it real quick, and I'll give you some food for thought, initial impressions on how this edition is going to play. Well, let's take a quick little look. So, of course, it comes with all the core rules inside, and it's really cool. It's got, like, all the different things. I really like how well indexed it is. That generally means good things, because in the past, Games Workshop has sort of, like, not really released good index stuff, but they seem to really wanting to be doing that effectively as well. So let's dive into it. Quick synopsis of everything. Now you can sit back, relax. We're going to go over this in more detail in other videos, but this just gives you a general idea of things that I quickly noticed that I think are kind of cool. So you build an army now, relatively the same. A lot of that stuff will come up later as we learn about dispositions and how to build your army. Units and models are about the same. They have sort of codified how active and opposing player work. So, and then eventually, I believe they're also going to show us like an order of operations for like a stack, so that it's, you know, we know exactly what happens in what order when specific things happen in a turn, which I think is going to be really useful. Measuring distances now is from base to base. Unless you have the frame keyword, in which case is from any part of your like model to base. So when it comes to measuring range, it's just base to base. Dice about the same thing. If you're you roll d6s a lot of time, and then they show that off. Leadership rolls and battle shock tests. You know, kind of like showing off that a battle shock test is a type of leadership roll. And it happens in a specific amount of times. Biggest thing here is battle shocked units fail actions that they have started, so they immediately fail to do the action. That's something that's new. And also, battle shocks are persistent, which means if you are battle shocked, you have to take a test to un-battle shock. That is a big change from the previous edition. Then we go into the datasheets, about the same, nothing too crazy, except they've added in basically abilities or characteristics that have the dash keyword, which is like that means that you have nothing. Everything else is about the same. Except when it's dash, it cannot be modified or added or anything like that. So if you have like objective control dash, which is what you get when you are battle shocked, you cannot then subsequently use a rule that gives you +1 to make it 1. It stays as dash. Which is important as well, especially here it says here. If a model has an OC characteristic of dash, it is unable to control objectives at all, and that's just how that is. Okay, moving on. Moving units. Biggest thing about changing moving is models must move in a straight line, which means this dice is a model and it moves in a straight line. And then if it has a pivot, it pivots after it's finishing its straight line move and then moves again. and then it can pivot again. Pivoting does no longer cost any movement, but it means that you have to sort of like move from A to B in a straight line before you pivot. There's no longer sort of moving as you're pivoting, and it also means there should not be any stretchy tape measures. You have a model, you move it, and then if you want to go around, you move it A to B. Now, something that I really liked, which is a quality of life improvement, is that if you move a model, or you start moving a model or unit, and it doesn't fit where you want it to, you're supposed to just place it back where it began, and you have not started to move that unit, which allows you to then go off and move something else, and then come back. That is a really small quality of life improvement for those people who punish themselves by potentially saying, oh, I totally messed that up, and I started moving this model and I have to finish. And also, on the other side, the folks that were always really annoyed being like, you started moving that model, now you have to finish moving that model, which was always a pain in the butt. So ending a move, just things like that. You just have to start a move, end a move, but it's all done in a series of straight lines, which is kind of cool. Also setting up and coherency. Coherency is different. You have to be within 9 inches of every model in your unit, which is really cool. It stops crazy string outs, and in engagement range is at 2 inches now instead of 1 inch, which is really, really cool. That does make, essentially taking up most of the board is different as well. Now we're going to basically shooting or resolving attacks. You select a weapon, you select your targets, you resolve your attacks. Now attacks are done by identical series of attacks. You pull them all together and you essentially just do all the weapons at the same time. Fast rolling is just a rule nowadays. You just roll all your dice and move on with it. Roll to hit, roll to wound, etc. etc. A couple of different cool rules that I've noticed. Things like lethal hits are the same, except you don't have to choose the lethal hit. You can choose to not take a lethal hit if you want to, say, subsequently try and get a devastating wound. Now, that'll only apply to folks that have played the game a lot, but it does make sense. When it does hit, it's about the same. You try and beat your web skill, ballistic skill, together with any modifiers. You roll to wound, which is about the same as last edition, so that doesn't really have changed. As for save rolls, you have to create groups, and you have to roll your saves fast. So it's very, very simple. I have a group with a captain, a Terminators with lightning claws, and Terminators with Thunderhammer storm shields. And so I shoot them with a bunch of, las cannons. And I do say plasma guns, and I do 6 saves with overcharged plasma guns. I no longer pick a model and then roll a save for each model. That doesn't happen anymore. Now I just grab all of the plasma gun wounds and I go, okay, so group 1 is going to be my Lightning Claw Terminator, group 2 is going to be my Thunderhammer Terminator, and group 3 is going to be my captain or whatever character I have in there, because they have to be at the end. And then I roll all my saves together, just like that. And then what I do is I apply the lowest save to the highest save. So a Lightning Claw is going to take a wound and then take another wound and die. And then I have 1 more wound to give, but then everybody else has 4 up-invols, so they have now passed them, and we have resolved all of the plasma gun hits. That means that I've lost 1 of the Lightning Claw Terminators, and 1 has taken 2 damage from an overcharged plasma gun. That's how fast dice rolling by groups works. Very cool, I really like that change. Then we have visibility. So line of sight is determined between models. So a model has to have line of sight. Basically, it's model to model. And then it determines whether units are wholly visible, partially visible, or not visible at all. Mortal wounds are about the same as they were before. However, they are now applied at the end of each activation group. So instead of doing all the plasmas, all the guns, like autocannons and say all the Gatling cannons, and then applying all the dev wounds that you had at the end. Now it's per sort of weapon group. So if the plasma guns do devastating wounds, you roll for their saves, and then apply any devastating wounds that they would have had in the order of the groups that we talked about before. So that's kind of cool about mortal wounds, devastating wounds, things like that. Hazard rolls are now failed on a 1 or a 2. So they've doubled the damage of hazard rolls, and they've made a lot of things hazardous to represent just nasty stuff, like overheating plasma guns, all the way to running away from combat. You take a single mortal wound to the unit, which means you can allocate it as you see fit. And of course, monsters and vehicles just take 3 mortal wounds. This is a big departure from essentially losing entire models, which means that it's both More dangerous for one wounded models, but also less dangerous for multi-wound models. Let's take a look at the battle round. So the battle round consists of 2-player turns. So we have the start of the battle round, end of the battle round, and in between we have 2-player turns. Each player turn has a start of turn, a command phase, a movement phase, a shooting phase, a charge phase, and a fight phase, and then an end of turn as well. They have made a small change to the command phase where now you start the command phase and do any abilities that trigger at the start of the command phase. Then you get your core CP, which is basically you gain a CP. Then you do all your battle shock tests or check for folks that are battle shocked. Big thing about battle shock is now you have to test at half strength or less, and or if you were already battle shocked. Then you do any command abilities that say in the command phase do X or Y. There is now a very specific slot for all those things to happen. And then you do anything that happens at the end of the command phase as well. Then we have the movement phase. You start your movement phase and you move your units. Now they've had a lot of different types of moves. So remain stationary, normal move, advance, fullback, disembark move, or ingress move. Now the important thing here to note is that an ingress move is just a type of move. Essentially what used to be the reserve step is now just something you do as you're moving your models. You can add them in at any point in your movement phase as you see fit, which is definitely important as well. And you'll notice the ingress move happens a lot. It also happens, basically it's what the setup is basically an ingress move now. Then we move into the shooting phase. At the start of the shooting phase, you can shoot. You basically pick your units to shoot. They do normal shooting, assault shooting, close quarter shooting, or indirect shooting. They've just basically codified all the different types of shooting that we normally do. Normal shooting is as is. You're just not eligible to start an action. Assault shooting allows you to shoot assault weapons, which is something that you know and love already. Close quarter shooting is basically shooting at vehicles or monsters that are in close combat, or vehicles or monsters that are in close combat shooting into their own close combat, or pistols, which is sort of like the new word for close quarters, essentially. So units that used to have the pistol keyword are probably going to end up getting the close quarters keyword over time. Last but not least, a big change to indirect shooting. Indirect shooting hits on 6s and cannot re-roll to hit. Ever. You cannot re-roll to hit. However, if they remain stationary and someone else in your army can see the target and the target is visible to someone else, they get spotted and you roll the hit on 4 pluses instead. Basically what happened before, except now you need an additional step to get someone else to spot the target. However, not being able to re-roll hit rolls is a big deal. Big changes to the charge phase. That's right. So in the charge phase, you simply pick a unit that wants to charge, and say you have multiple targets, you can say, I'm just going to charge, and then you roll your charge distance. And then you pick a unit that is within that charge distance, or multiple units, and then you say, I'm going to charge both of those units, or 1 unit, or 0 units if you don't want to charge at all. So you can change your mind. That is a nice change of pace. However, charge moves are base to base, which means you have to roll enough distance to base the physical model. So before you would be 7.1 inches away, you'd have to roll a 7. Now if you're 7.1 inches away, you have to roll an 8 because you would have to be able to base. Now, when you make a charge move, you have to try get within 1 inch of the enemy, if at all possible. If that's not possible, you can get within the 2-inch engagement range. This prevents anything from like walls or barricades or things to get in the way of a successful charge. No more force fielding the world, the wall malarkey, which is something that they actually put in there, the article that talked about as well. I really like this change for charges, and I hope you do as well. As we move into the fight phase, all fights happen a little differently. So now all pylons happen at the same time. The player whose turn it is does all their pylons, and then the player whose turn it is not, the reactive player, does all of their pylons then as well. Then you go back and forth, starting with the player whose turn it is to do the fights. Yes, that means that fights first has indeed changed and is now not as crazy as it did before. When you charge, you do get fights first, and then you basically pick all the fights first units. You go back and forth, starting with the player whose turn it is. So it gives you more agency as a close combat player as well, which I think is really cool. I like this change. I think it'll be back and forth. It allows for some skill expression. For things like pile-ins, you no longer have to pile in towards the closest model. You pile in towards basically the closest unit, or you pick a unit you're in an engagement range with, and you basically try and get as close as possible to that unit, which allows you to sort of like move a little bit more freely. However, if you are base to base with a model, you cannot pile in, which gives the player whose turn it is a little bit more control and agency as to where they want to move their units to pin enemy models in place. Then we have the consolidation phase, which is very similar. However, it all happens at the end. So after you've done all your fights, you can do your consolidations. In a general standard, it's about the same. Pile into your enemy, or pile into consolidate into a new enemy, or consolidate onto an objective, or even move around on an objective if you cannot get in combat with an opponent. Instead of a pile-in which happens within 5 inches of the enemy, this only happens within 3 inches of the enemy as well. So it's a little tighter, but the fight phase, I think, is going to be a very interesting change to the game. In terms of movement and terrain, if you're going over exposed or light terrain, all models can move through it, basically, which makes sense. As for dense terrain, only infantry, beasts, swarm, and mobile models can move horizontally through them, and infantry, beasts, and swarm models can move vertically through dense terrain features to go up on floors. Really cool thing is they've sort of said, hey, you have to be within ½ an inch of a feature to move up it, which allows you to sort of like know how close you need to get to the wall in order to go up and or down vertically. You also set up a random move. If you want to end on the 2nd floor of ruins, your base has to fully fit. If you're an infantry, beast, swarm, have fly, or are a monster as well. And so they've really outlined this quite well. I really like the changes to terrain. I feel it's definitely more useful and more interactive than it was in the previous edition. Then we have terrain and visibility. So all of the areas of terrain will block line of sight. So, but now you can see through the terrain, or be seen through the terrain if you're within it, or if your opponent is within it and they can see through you. They've also added the benefit of cover is now -1 to the ballistic skill of the attacking model attacking. However, in order to get the benefit of cover, the entire unit must be within the terrain from the attacking model. So it's a model-to-model thing, and it's more the attacker that has to check rather than the defender. But if, as the defender, you want to be all or nothing, so stay in terrain or don't get the cover bonus, essentially. There's a new rule called Hidden, which allows infantry, beast, and swarm to hide in terrain, which is a 15-inch sort of like visibility protection range where the enemy has to get within 15 to shoot you unless you are shot. Now, only infantry, beast, and swarm can benefit from Hidden if they are in an area terrain piece that has one or more dense terrain features, which is really cool. So make sure you know what dense terrain is in there and try and be hidden. That'll stop you from getting shot. Now, if a unit shoots, they are no longer hidden in the previous turn. They have to have shot. So use this to your advantage to sneak up on the enemy and only reveal yourself when you are ready. Obscuring is, of course, area terrain that has lighter dense pieces are obscuring so they can't be seen through. And then solid terrain features like the walls have the bottom floor blocking line of sight. So things like windows and holes will be counted as completely blocked, which is a rule that was in a lot of tournaments, but they've codified it as solid now in the new edition. Now, this doesn't mean that walls appear where walls do not exist, and it's only for holes. So if you've got like this craggy area here on the terrain, it doesn't automatically make that straight. The craggy pieces still count as craggy pieces for line of sight, but the windows and little holes in the feature do not. And then one of the biggest changes to the new edition is objectives are terrain. You're going to be fighting over buildings, and buildings will have a footprint, and that footprint is the entirety of the terrain piece, which means in order to get level of control, you have to put lots of models that have an objective control characteristic all around the piece of terrain. Now you can see that all the terrain has like lips around where the buildings are sort of pushed in a little bit, so you should be able to put quite a few models on these pieces of terrain to really solidify control over these objectives. And of course, you can still use what we call sticky, which is now called secured objectives. if you control an objective with something that does like sticky, like Cabalite Warriors, for example, you can then move off it and you don't have to worry about holding it until the enemy goes and takes it away from you as well. So now we're fighting over buildings instead of little 40mm or little millimeter counters that you have to be within 3 inches of. Now, being within 3 of the objective, quote unquote, is the entire footprint, which is kind of cool and more thematic in my opinion. Stratagems are one of the things that really increase the power of your army, depending on detachment. And well, we've seen quite a few differences in stratagems. One of the big things is you can only have a unit be affected by a stratagem once per phase. There's no more stacking stratagems, which means if you have a shooting stratagem that increases your shooting, and then subsequently you want to use the command point reroll, you can no longer do that. That is a big change. It also means if you have like a charge stratagem, like an advance and charge that you use in the charge phase, you can no longer use that and then use the reroll charges as an example. Or if you're forced to reroll a charge to get into combat, you can no longer use something like a tank shock or what is now called crushing impact after you've made that charge because you've already used the stratagem. This has huge implications for the game, and there are some really cool changes to the strats. Command point reroll is about the same. Epic challenge is about the same. Insane bravery is about the same once per game as well. Explosives, the new word for grenades. So now things, I guess more things will be able to get an explosive keyword rather than grenades. Crushing impact, also usable by monsters. That's the old tank shock. However, you can also do damage to yourself as well because you're using the bulk of your toughness to do damage to the enemy. Rapid ingress has remained mainly unchanged. You just can't do it in the first battle round. They've codified that nicely. And then Fire Overwatch. This big change here. It's at the end of the movement phase of your opponent's movement phase, and you can pick any non-Titanic unit to shoot at any other enemy unit within 24 inches invisible. Now, make sure you note that visibility because you can use hidden to get nice and close to the enemy and avoid some of those overwatches. So that's really important. But it also means that you cannot re-roll hit rolls with snap shooting because you're doing snap shooting. So you can't re-roll hit rolls with Fire Overwatch, changing a lot of the units that used to do Overwatch to probably things like flamers or things that have rules like lethal hits or sustained hits to maximize on it. But it's more of a desperate thing rather than a full-blown strategy as well. And since it happens at the end of the movement phase, you can't really like pin your opponent in place either. Smoke screen is the new one for smoke. That has changed to be used at the start of the shooting phase. So that's really interesting because you have to commit to it, but anything that is behind your smoke screen unit or is blocked by the smoke screen gets the benefit of cover. So you can use that, a rhino, for example, to move up and create some smoke in order to protect everybody behind the smoke screen. Heroic Intervention has also changed. You can still use it to charge something that did a charge. However, it's now anything within 12 inches because you just roll the charge and then you have to select a unit within 12 that completed a charge. And it is at the end of the charge phase as well. You can also do a brand new one that costs 2 CP. This one is essentially a charge on any unit within 6 inches, whether or not they made a charge roll or not. So you can use this to really defend areas of the battlefield more effectively. Last but not least, your counteroffensive is your interrupt. Gives you the fights first rule to a unit and forces them to fight next. And you can use it right after your opponent has fought. So that hasn't really changed. Now we have doing actions. So actions are all very different depending on your mission, depending on units, depending on what you need to try and achieve. So each action will tell you when you start it, who has to do it, how many times you can do it, when it completes, and what the effect happens. So you basically cannot do an action if you're an aircraft or fortification. You cannot start an action if you're battle shocked or have an OC of 0 or dash. If you're engaged, unless you're Titanic, it's any Titanic unit can now do it. And or you made an advance or fallback move, essentially, right? So that's really cool. So if you're battle shocked or become battle shocked, doing the actions will then fail. And then the effect will be triggered. So I like that they made a codified version of what actions are and how they work. Then we go into the advanced rules, basically moving monsters and vehicles. Biggest thing here is monsters and vehicles can now move over friendly monsters and vehicles, which is really, really cool. Also, monsters and vehicles can move through friendly and enemy models. It's just any enemy models, excluding other monster or vehicle models that are enemies, basically, which is really, really cool. Which is very interesting. So you can not really screen too well either, which is cool. So frame is a new keyword. Anything that has basically no base, it will probably get the frame keyword. It essentially means that you measure from any part of the hull or the model itself. And when rotating the frame, you don't have base, you turn it at any amount around its central axis while keeping it upright. So there's no more, they've actually codified the you cannot put your vehicle on the table sideways into the rules. No more rhino on its side, which I think is really cool as well. You can shoot and engage monsters and vehicles, but you suffer a -1 to hit unless you're shooting them with close quarters weapons and you're engaged with them. So, you know, same things. That's the big guns never tire. They basically kept that the same. Now we move into transport. So transports are very similar. You can still embark and disembark. Essentially, that's how it works. Now you have a couple of different disembarkation moves. You've got your disembarking before moving, which allows then the unit to move. You have a disembarkation that sends you into combat, which is a combat disembark, which if you basically go right into combat, if your transport is surrounded, except you take a battle shock test or you take a hazard roll and then you're battle shocked, you can do a rapid disembark, which is after you move. You basically move the transport, then just ingress the unit, which is fine. And then, of course, you have the emergency disembark. So if your vehicle is destroyed, this is a big change. Your unit is going to have to get out, touching the vehicle that it just got out of and taking a hazard roll. Hazard rolls are really dangerous for us lowly elves. We die to hazard rolls. Using transports is going to be very, very risky. So we're going to have to use them more as a tactical choice rather than just like a straight up, we use them all the time choice. But they're still very powerful because they can get you to where you need to go fast and quick. And a quick change to forming attached units. So attached units are essentially units that have leaders and or support units attached to them. Now they've codified, or they're going to codify, leader and support units within the army books. And you can attach a support unit and a leader to any one type of unit, and that's just going to make it easy for you to make your complex units. When attacking an attached unit, you essentially, they made it a little simpler to understand, and in terms of keywords, they're basically explaining how it uses, like, when you have abilities in attached units. So leaders are always leading. They always get their abilities that say when they're leading a unit, even if the unit has died. However, if the unit has died, you do not get any of the bodyguard units abilities or keywords because those things don't sort of like transfer themselves. It just means that they're just making it simple for you to see in this ability section. Strategic reserves have been simplified. Now simply 50% of your point limit can go into strategic reserve, and that's it. Yeah, very, very straightforward. You also repositioned units is what we call uppy downy, putting units back into strategic reserve. They've made it very, very straightforward. And of course, arriving strategic reserves is simply an ingress move like we talked before, where you can do your ingress. Now, using Deep Strike allows you to essentially ingress as usual outside of the restrictions of being close to a board edge. But they've made it very simple. No longer do you have to split Deep Strike and or regular reserves. Now it's just reserves. 50% of your points can be put into reserve. A couple of changes to surge moves and flying models. Basically, they have made surge moves a type of move that basically allows you to get into close combat. Lots of units like Khorne Berserkers and Black Templar Crusader squads have access to a surge move. Usually, if they take damage, then they can surge into it. They're just codifying exactly how it works and making it simple. Also, flying models can use a take to the skies special rule, which allows them to essentially spend 2 inches to move over anything, which is awesome. That allows them to do it when they normal, advance, fallback, or charge, meaning that fly is back, baby. I'm so excited as an elf for this, but please let me know, like Reaver jet bikes, Hellions, like, oh, I'm so happy about this fly move, and it makes me very happy it's back. We also have aura abilities, of course. Units are within range of their own aura abilities, but they're on the battlefield, essentially, as well. So, yeah, they have to be on the battlefield in order to use them. Faction abilities are known as faction abilities, psychic abilities, war gear abilities. They're all basically how that works. And then plunging fire is a new sort of way to do shooting. If you're on a level higher than your opponents, 3 inches at least or more, you get +1 ballistic skill to offset the benefit of cover. If you are a titanic towering monster, if you're a towering creature, you can get within 12 inches of an enemy and also get +1 ballistic skill, which will offset the cover bonus or make it even better for you to kill the enemy. A really cool change to aircraft. They essentially start in reserve no matter what, then they come in with an ingress move, they shoot, and then at the end of the opponent's fight phase, they go off the table. That's it. You basically then bring them back as a repositioned unit, and they do it again until they die. It represents them flying around doing strafing runs. I really like this change to aircraft. They can never get plunging fire. They cannot declare charges. Only fly models can attack them, but I really like the fact that they just come in and leave. No special line of sight, anything at all. They just basically have the same rules as normal. And then we have a little reference thing that shows all the abilities. So we've got Anti, which is critical hits or wounds on a specific dice roll. Assault, which is the same. Blast, which hasn't really changed. Cleave, which is a new rule. It's Blast. For close combat, which is cool. Close quarters, the new basically pistol rule. Deadly Demise, essentially blowing up vehicles and monsters. Deep Striking, still basically the same. When you ingress, you can be 8 inches away from the enemy now. Devastating Wounds, so that hasn't really changed. Extra attacks hasn't really changed. Feel No Pain hasn't really changed to deny wounds. Fights First has definitely changed because of combat. Even though it's the same, it's different. Firing deck for your vehicles is about the same as well. Hazardous rolls have now changed too, so we have to make sure you check that. Heavy weapons are cool now. If the unit with heavy weapons moves 3 inches or less, they get the bonus heavy weapon +1 to hit, which is awesome. I really like that. Hover, they basically take to the skies for free, which is really nice. Ignore cover, pretty straightforward. Stealth is now ignore cover. Indirect fire, we went over that. Infiltrators can now set up anywhere outside of 8 inches from their opponent's deployment zone and enemy units. Lance is the same. Leader is about the same. Lethal hits is the same, except it's now choose to automatically wound. Lone operative is the same. Melta is about the same. One-shot weapons are about the same. Pistol weapons are close quarter weapons, basically. They say it right here in the pistol section. You have the precision rule, which is about the same. Basically force the characters to be in the first damage group when rolling for saves. Very, very dangerous for characters now, as the lowest dice rolls of a pool will have to go to the character, making them very vulnerable. Psychic weapons are back. The psychic keyword ignores modifiers to weapon skill, ballistic skill, and all modifiers to the hit roll as well, which is really, really cool. It's awesome. I love it. That's really, really neat. Rapid fire is about the same. Scouts got a really cool new thing. So they do their scout move after they know who goes first, or their dedicated transport did. Or if you put the scout unit in strategic reserve after you know who goes first, you can deploy the scout unit inside of your deployment zone. I absolutely love this. This is one of the coolest changes. Stealth is cover, support is attached units. Super heavy walkers are very similar. Sustained hits the same, torrent the same. Twin linked is the same. And then you have into your digital support. This is a rules appendix. There are a couple of different things about adding units, destroyed. So make sure to read all these around. There's a little FAQ and a really cool core rules appendix. But make sure you check out all the stuff. Huge shout out to Games Workshop for sending me the core rules. And let me know what you think with a comment down below if you're excited about this new edition. And there you have it, folks. My initial impressions and a quick little synopsis of the brand new edition of Warhammer 40,000. I will be doing more of these little videos, so if there's something you would like me to cover, make sure you leave a comment down below. Don't forget, folks, play to learn, play to teach. And I've been Skari, your grateful host. Signing off until next time, Skari out. The Dark Kin.